With Egypt enjoying a short break from civil unrest, events in Syria have somewhat stolen the headlines. However, European politicians are still eager to promote democracy and freedom within the region. So I met with MEP Charles Tannock, an influential member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, to ask him about the latest developments.
Well, of course, the most dramatic announcement was the legal decision by the courts to dissolve the structures and sequester the funds which belong to the Muslim Brotherhood organization. There are many in the European Parliament who feel that it's an unwise move, that really it's best to have dialogue with them openly. They represent a very significant proportion of the population.
Now that the Muslim Brotherhood has been dissolved, what are the chances of still securing peace and democracy in Egypt?
Well, I don't think we are peacemakers in Egypt. We are interested observers, and our main objectives are to enhance trade, investment, humanitarian aid, stabilize the Egyptian economy, and encourage a rapid return to democratic government.
Are the EU shrinking from their responsibility?
It does. The EU globally tends to be more of a payer than a player. That's perfectly true, and I think it's a fair criticism generally. I think Egypt's a particularly delicate example. I mean, I'm not quite sure what more we can do. We can only have a limited amount of influence, but obviously from the European perspective, from its neighbors, and particularly of interest to your viewers, I'm a strong friend of Israel. A stable Egypt is in everybody's interest.
Whether the EU sees itself as a peacemaker or not, I spoke to the North Africa director at International Crisis Group think tank, Ishandar El-Arami, to find out how successful the EU has been in Egypt.
The EU is trying to get more involved in Egypt. It has been very involved in mediations in July and August. Those have failed, but that's because, to a large extent, the Egyptian government does not want mediations to take place right now. How the future of EU-Egypt relations evolves will depend on a number of things, whether these mediations resume, whether there is more inclusion, a democratic path chosen by the Egyptian government. And there's a lot of stakes with the Egyptian government, about over 5 billion euros worth of aid that's contingent on political and economic issues. And there's also a regional dimension to this. Countries like Israel are actually quite happy with what's happened in Egypt. They much would rather deal with a military-led government than a Muslim Brotherhood-led government.
The Muslim Brotherhood may be driven underground, but Israel will be relieved that some stability has returned to Egypt as the country continues its search towards democracy and freedom. This is Bjarke Smith-Meyer for JN1 at the European Parliament in Brussels.